On this very special episode of That Kingsville Podcast, Mayor Nelson Santos joins us for the last time.
So Nelson, what's your deepest, darkest secret that you've never been able to tell us? You're not mayor anymore. It's fine. What can you tell us? Deep, dark secrets. Fine.
Listen to this episode for all that and more on That Kingsville Podcast.
Did you hear I love soccer?
Soccer. That's
Is he Portuguese?
nonsense. It's like a sport.
That Kingsville Podcast is proudly supported by Kingsville Brewery. Brewed for the outdoors, best enjoyed with good company. This summer, they're inviting everyone to #Share Your Kingsville. Whether you're in your backyard in Dallas or camping out in the wild in Sault Ste. Marie or anywhere in between, they want to
even Agila Toserantio.
Agila Toserantio. Toserantio.
Beautiful mountain.
Yeah, there we are. Post a photo with you and one of Kingsville brews or merchandise and use the hashtag #ShareYourKingsville and tag them for a chance to win weekly prizes all summer long. Your team will select their favorite photo each week. So cheers to the everyday adventure. Thank you, Kingsville Brewery. Welcome to a special edition of That Kingsville Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Hunt. With me, Kevin Black.
Hello.
Steve Ianson. And the man of the hour, Mayor Nelson Santos. Thanks for joining us one more time.
Thank you for having me.
Mayor Santos, you've recently made a statement quite publicly that you're leaving Windsor, Essex County, and more so, your mayorship of the town of Kingsville. Explain to us what happened, please.
What happened? Well, it's called, I guess, recognizing, the space you're in, the community you're in, and the career I've had, in public life, with my family, and going through obviously the last, couple of years with the pandemic and the commitment, I've certainly made to the community and the town, and you see the pressures of watching my young family growing up and wanting to create obviously more time, with them, appreciating that time is fleeting and they're growing pretty quick. And there's an opportunity that comes forward, once in a while. And this is one that's a career, life-changing opportunity that helps me continue to do what I enjoy, inspired work, community building, helping world in the municipal life in another form. But this is one that, hits home to me, and having to have a bittersweet decision to, walk away from something I've, truly dedicated to and put my heart into, supporting, this community in whatever way the ask came. This was finally a personal choice internally with our family that said it's the right time. And we're feeling good about it. Bittersweet, absolutely, but definitely feeling good about, where we're headed.
We'll get into, the history of Nelson Santos in a bit.
Because
we're here all night.
Because Mayor Santos.
Uh-oh. Oh my. That theme.
This is Your Life, a program.
Who's crashing through the curtain?
This is your life, Mayor Santos.
Lyle Miller.
I remember him. 30 years he was in Gosfield North Township, and he served on the amalgamated council with me when I was a counselor one of the terms, and then we ran against each other for deputy mayor, and always still had a good relationship with him, for the work he committed to the community. Yeah.
That so he was 30 years. Do we know who the longest serving mayor of Gosfield South or the town or Gosfield North was? What was or is?
Yes.
Obviously, the town of Kingsville is you,
right.
like the amalgamated town of Kingsville, because it was fairly fresh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder, 30 years. That's got to be.
But he wasn't mayor or grieved the whole 30 years either. So
okay.
he had a 30-year career in municipal life with the township.
So is it you, Nelson? Are you the longest serving mayor?
From what I've seen and read so far, I have to look back on some of the Kingsville Archives reporter pages to see if there's some stories on there. But it's a long-standing, yeah.
So like I said, we'll get into the career, but I know a lot of people are wondering about the decision, and like you said, this was something that it felt right, and you're not getting out of municipal politics. You'll be on the other side of it, not having to worry about the key political decisions. What are going to be some of your duties when you're there? What does the role look like now that you're going to be filling in Adula Tozerantio?
Correct. Very well
we've
done.
been
Well done.
practicing.
Good. Yeah, we're going to keep it short to Adjtos. It's a lot simpler. We're already I'm learning the new speak for the community and the township. So looking forward to that. Certainly taking on the role from being like the mayor and the CEO to cross the administrative table and serve as the CAO, the Chief Administrative Officer, is really going to be more about managing people, managing staff, working collectively with the senior management team. I know their team is growing and also changing, and there's a new team around the table there that is looking for, again, additional support. And when I went through the opportunity and the interview process, I was identifying with their community that's also growing. They're a small township. They have challenges with the border communities, with the growth from the GTA, but also a supportive Simcoe County, so a supportive upper tier that is looking to work with them, and creating new relationships and creating the ability to connect new services, to their township is something that they saw in what I kind of bring to the table with my experience, not just municipally and certainly as an elected representative, but obviously my knowledge of the municipal act and the process and a lot of the team building and being able to connect different associations, certainly professional engagement with whether it's consultants or neighboring communities. They see that and saw that as an asset to have the courage and support for me to come online. And I'm hoping the experience that I bring from my experience at County of Essex, the City of Windsor, Town of Kingsville, neighboring Chatham, Kent, like the relationships that we've helped foster have really played a strong role in how great our region is. And that's, something I take pride in, because I've never put myself forward as the one. I've served the role that was asked of me. So helping bring people together, collaborate, have the discussion, whether we agree or disagree. At the end of the day, if we made a little bit of progress because we've looked at something a different way, that means a lot. And then we've seen how much change has happened in our community because the people help make the change. The groups help make the change. The businesses were part. Like everyone played a role, and helping try to keep that together, that mesh. That's something I kind of embrace. And I can be in the back room, kind of just saying, "Let you guys shine," knowing that you just strengthened our community because of your efforts, and that's the golden to me.
And growing up in Central Ontario, it's different than here politically, because there's obviously the relationship building for smaller communities with the next larger urban center, not much different than Kingsville to Windsor, or Windsor, Essex, Chatham County. Up there you'll run into the same, where it's Adula and Alliston, or Adula and Barrie, but the difference up there and in the area where I was around Peterborough was very similar, where there's always Toronto just kind of looming in the background, and you always had to have some kind of relations with the provincial government, with Toronto councillors, because so many issues when you're in that region around land use planning, around conservation authorities, around environmental stewardship cross boundaries and end up being decisions that are being made around, the Toronto City Council table or around Queen's Park. Obviously you've dealt with, a lot of that work in your relationships with political, people in the Toronto area and also provincially. So I would assume, you're ready for that. Have you had any conversations or discussions yet with, some of the municipal councillors or administration about some of those relationships and, where, you're going to have to bring a bit of your expertise and a bit of your knowledge in navigating some of those.
Absolutely. I think when you look at, you know, the size of the township that, you know, I'm going to, it's not, they don't have a large resource. Their assessment base is actually very, very small comparative to their county. Very similar to what I've experienced here in Kingsville, being one of the smaller assessment bases community, trying to find ways to deliver services, you know, whether it's increasing the level of services, what is that appropriate level of service? That's where Ajala I see is at right now, trying to, one, find a way to grow, because their area of servicing is pretty limited. They're working with a new official plan with the county of Simcoe, obviously being the upper tier, helping lead that. So I'm already familiar with some of the challenges that they're seeing there, and where are the service centers that they can help partner and collaborate to bring services in, so it doesn't cost a lot of taxpayers' investment or dollars to bring in those services, and still partner and utilize the growth to help pay for that. And that's the kind of background I'm bringing to them, to acknowledge that we're not going to put all of this pressure on the existing taxpayers' backs to see investment that they kind of need to grow for assessment purposes, but more importantly to grow in the right places. And I think they've already acknowledged that as they're going through their current official plan review. But in terms of connection with the province and the upper levels of government, certainly my first discussions with them after we were able to, you know, sign the contract was to ensure that the township had a voice, started making appearances with ministers and ministries at upcoming conferences. And I've seen that they haven't taken full advantage of that as of yet. But right off the bat, even before I've got there, I ensured that we created that invitation to meet with a couple ministries. So Ministry of Agriculture is one invite that we've already made, and another invite with Ministry of Finance was the other one, to ensure that we can allow an introduction of, you know, what the community represents and what some of the pressures they have. So we're looking forward to the AMO conference. So again, still be attending and working with their council to make presentations and delegations to speak about what their pressures are. Again, being just outside of Toronto, recognizing the growth right around the perimeter of the township. How can we utilize, I think, our neighbors to create a stronger and start to community build in a more of a strategic way.
Their former CAO probably didn't have Doug Ford's cell phone number.
Probably not, but she is now working with the province, so she did pick up a job in the ministry. So that
maybe
could be one we can have another
possibly
cell phone in the ministry.
All right, let's go way back with young Nelson Santos, prior to every decision to run for councillor and whatnot.
Okay.
What was the driving force when you made the decision, you know what, I think volunteering or applying to be a councillor is what you want to do? What was, you know, take us through what started you down this path?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, university, I studied, you know, public administration, political science, was leaning towards criminology and wanted to study for a lawyer. I had a great experience in high school with the co-op placement with Patrick Dunyon's law office. And that created the window for me to kind of, one, be involved somewhat politically in the community, but also understanding the service, you know, to help support people when they need something. And, you know, when they say lawyers, people sometimes cringe, but I saw that, you know, one of the cases I worked on as a high school kid was a small claims case for the lawyer. And it was to help someone go through it and get what they deserved. And that kind of, you know, for being a teenager, like a senior high school student, actually doing small claims like case and paperwork, I saw that as ideal. And that inspired me to start that way. So when I went to university and I was studying the poli-sci and that, I kind of was always wanted to be engaged in what can I contribute to the community, whether it's, you know, volunteer or a group organization. I never saw myself as political or a public representative in that sense. I did see myself working from the other side of the table. I was studying that way. I was kind of leaning towards what's the process. But it was after university, getting a job at the local newspaper, working freelance for the first few years, working for the Windsor Star when they had the county's own pages. That gave me a great experience. So I was doing both, right? Working as a freelancer with the local paper, working with as a freelancer with the Star. I did freelance work for the Globe and Mail. Like I was just loving the opportunity to write. So being creative in that sense was a driving force for me. But then getting involved in the community, being out to the schools, understanding what was happening, reporting what was happening. Council beat then became my next, focus. And then year after year, week after week, kind of reporting on it and seeing the changes they were affecting, the ideas that were going forward. The first strategic plan I saw Town of Kingsville put together in 94 prior to amalgamation, where they actually used the community to kind of gauge some projects and goals. Within 2 years, they were putting that on the shelf and I was still doing the council beat. And I'm going, you're making decisions contrary to a strategic plan that you said was going to be your guiding document. And from there, I got more piqued and interested. And I believe I was writing more hard-pressing editorials at the time in the paper prior to being an elected representative. So being on that other pen side, it was interesting. And then continuing to see the disengagement from that public policy that they created, which is why they were there, just inspired me to get more involved.
So since we're in an election year, put yourself back in your shoes when you were first running as a fresh candidate for council. What was that process like? We're going to get to you.
I don't want to get to me.
Because we do have two that were candidates and whatnot and have similar
Terrible
experiences. Well, this is Nelson.
This is not similar. Nelson never lost.
Well, so
Right.
when you actually started your campaign and started to say, I'm going to commit, what was that like for you?
Right.
Maybe a little bit of an insight for some hopefully potentially first time
So
candidates
everyone
this year.
questioned, why am I running now? It's 1997. It's going to be a 1-year term for councillor. Amalgamation is hitting in the next year. You're going to have to run for a re-election in 12 months. So basically 25 years to the day, today, I knocked on my first few doors for the campaign. 20-something-year-old kid, knocking on doors. The candidates field was acclamation for mayor, acclamation for the deputy reeve, and that there were 5 council members in place and I was number 6. So I forced the election by putting my name in at the time. And there were 6 candidates for 5 positions. New guy, youngest by quite a bit, generation gap between the members. And I had to somehow make sure I squeezed in the top 5. to get there. I knocked on pretty much every door at the time. I went back a couple times. I remember the first campaign. I had my little flyer that I, printed and cut up at home off of my own printer and everything to, again, a young kid starting up, still living at home with the folks at that time, just before the election. And I just worked hard and people really appreciated and seeing the work ethic to get out there. After the first results of the election, I finished in 5th place. So I made the cut. And that was exciting. That was, a proud moment for me, being a first generation, Portuguese community representative. And it happened. And it was just, working hard. And maybe it was the frosted tips in my hair at the time. So I really, showing the youthful flash. But the town supported me at the time, again, pre-amalgamation. And it was exciting to have the results come in.
I'm not going to ask who the 6th was, but I am interested to know what the reaction was. Not necessarily even from that individual, but sort of as a whole, maybe from... obviously you got the vote, so the reaction was positive from a lot of people, but maybe like, oh wow, he did it, he's in. And do you think at the time then, you previously mentioned that you were the youngest by far. That must have in a way worked in your favor because, you kind of get to a point where it's like, well, it's the same old, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. The fellow who I outvoted for that one last seat, it was still pretty close at the end of the day. And I respected him very well because even though, I was able to get the seat ahead of him, he was very respectful. And Councillor Bob Allen, like Robert Allen, he was like the senator of Kingsville. He had served many terms, very well respected in the community, a historian, very involved with the Kingsville Golf Course. Like, again, another community advocate, but he had been there a long time. And the community responded saying there's a lot of experience at the table because, again, everyone was basically coming back. And I was just the one new voice that provided maybe a hint of the next generation, a hint of looking forward, wanting to. And I was pretty adamant that we wanted to invest in our community. I didn't want to see the same stale status quo. Like, a good year is not keeping your taxes at 0%. A good year is creating an investment in your community, so then you can watch, good things come from it.
Yeah.
And that's where I started was in that. So, it was always a challenge because, again, you recognize how large or how small your community is in terms of the ability to invest, but it's also setting the priority. So then you can say, let's work on this one step at a time. And that resonated with the public to say, okay, what else can we do? How can we create, and I went into it, how can we create a community that will want to have people drawn to it versus what we were seeing in my generation was everyone leaving it to go somewhere else.
Did you have any of those shut up kid moments? Did anyone give you the?
And did you fairly report about them when you wrote the article?
Did anyone?
I'm joking.
Yeah.
Did anyone look at you and say, "Hey, we don't mention the strategic plan"?
Yeah.
Like that was 2 years ago.
So, but before that was, I guess that was it. They had argued at the time saying that, well, it was just a guide. It wasn't meant to be the Bible. And I'm like, but that's not how you sold it to the community who came out to help write the language, to help support the protection of Lakeside Park, for example, the development of maintaining it as a green space. And then, a few months later, they're determining to sell off a part of the park to create a development. And then you look at, so why are you selling it? What's the purpose? Is it sustainable? So it's a one-time sale. They created good revenue, absolutely. And they helped fix a road with it. But how do you fix the next road? You can't go off selling more property. You have to start planning for that. So, I started looking at, what were our assets? What did we do downtown? Like, how do we focus on beautification? And even back then, again, reporting, you saw the BIA trying to do their part with their original coordinators in terms of beautification and putting investment of some of their dollars to the signs of all things. And then, I came along and I said, well, what if we put investment into things like the sidewalk? Make it prettier, safer.
Yeah, that was
right?
pretty much the first major scale project that you had when you was the sidewalk resurfacing and beautification.
Right. So from there, and the real one was the biggest one was going back to our sewer separation program.
Yes.
So going back to 2003, 2006 when
underground,
we actually
made
a commitment. Like, it's not the prettiest kind of project,
huge,
but the involvement and investment then meant, one, you're protecting the environment. Two, you're supporting residents and protecting their home from backflow and flooding. And three, you were creating more capacity, safer capacity with your existing infrastructure. So we had the lagoons at the time, and then we also went to the new plants with Gosfield South that was able to basically put away all of that combination flow and better provide the service to the residents, allow for the growth, because there was a development freeze as well during that time period previously that affected both the water plant because they were still needing to expand, but also the sewer capacity locally was at its max because you had a rainfall, how many homes would flood? And I saw the plan on the books from 1977, I think it was, when they first initiated the sewer separation plan, and they had done maybe 40% by 2003. And by focusing on this and creating the demand for, an environmental eye for it, we created an 11-year plan. We were able to get funding from the upper levels of government, which helped us reduce that to 8 years. And by 2011, so within 8 years, we completed the entire sewer separation plan, well ahead of many other municipalities who to this day are still struggling to do their sewer separation plan. And it put Kingsville ahead of that curve and put us as one of the few municipalities that had separated sewers. Again.
Well, and it opens up investment. Like, Leamington's in a position and has been for a long time, and I think they're getting close now, but for years they've been having to spend millions a year on sewer separation, and that's, while those dollars can come out of different funds, it's still money. Like, it's still taxpayer dollars coming from somewhere to go somewhere,
I don't want to jump too much from the timeline, but since you're just discussing the sewer separation program, obviously one challenge was the actual infrastructure itself. But as I recall at the time, and I was relatively new to covering council then, but it was can we describe it as a fiscally responsible, if you will, majority on council? Some might say tight with the money.
Frugal.
Did you really have to make a pitch because this is something you believed in, or was council really on board, understanding that, hey, you know what, it is going to cost some dollars, but the long term greater, outweighs what we're doing now?
No, I mean, fiscally conservative, I think, was kind of the tight, they had the real tight strings on the budget. You look at the time frame, and I'm pretty strategic. I do my research. I do my homework to kind of see where was Kingsville in terms of the big picture across the county. Where were our tax rates comparatively across our 7-member municipalities? And at the time, we were in the middle of the pack. We were like the 3rd or 4th highest, tax community on our property taxes. And I saw that as, okay, that's quite a challenge. So why are we there? What are we investing in? What is, where can we maybe better direct it? And then I looked at Gosfield South again, just as amalgamation was coming together. They had the lowest tax base or lowest tax rate amongst our communities. And then I looked at Gosfield North, and they were highest taxed of our 3 communities, which again, looking at the services, they didn't have 24-hour policing in their community. They had the what was that? Not even like a contract police for drive-by policing. They didn't have a full police force like Kingsville had, and like Gosfield South had full contracted OPP. So why were their taxes so high? So again, you start to meld together that the 3 communities to say, what's going on here? So when we did the amalgamation, went through that process initially, it was, okay, there's going to be a benefit to growing our assessment base. How do we focus the investment? And then you look at the basic needs. So you look at your services, you look at your roads, your water, making sure that the basics are covered. And what does that cost? We were able to put that together as a community, as a council, as our staff that was doing that. And right away you saw where things were more expensive in one area. So in Gosfield North, their tax rates dropped significantly to the level of like where Kingsville was. And Gosfield South residents' taxes went up a little bit because, again, it averages, right? Everything averaged out. But then as we created our first budget, we tried to maintain a level that was not regressive, not overly progressive, but at least showed that we could do investment. And that's where we started to see the change was, okay, so if the town is getting this, the townships are getting this area, how do we balance the funds? I mean, and that's always the argument is one area is getting more funding than the other and so forth. I get it, but that's always been part of the challenge is to try to find a balance. And for me, my focus was always community. So parks and recreation, services that people enjoy and want to take advantage of, even though not everybody does. But it shows that quality of life piece that was so important to me, so that we started to invest in those places. So whether it was Ridgeview Park or whether it was Lakeside Park or whether it was the Cedar Island and Cedar Beach area, what can we do? And that's when we started making arrangements and partnerships. And I mean, we partnered with the Conservation Authority to lease Cedar Beach because the Conservation Authority didn't really want to maintain it, but the municipality saw that as a value. So we entered into a long-term lease with them to ensure that it was viable in the long term. So little things like that started to make the difference.
Yeah, Kingsville made investments in the town and then caught him.
So
and in Ruthven, because that was the other huge expansion.
Re-elected in 98, Deputy Mayor 2000, and then Mayor 2003. Is that the correct timeline?
Yes.
What was the sort of, you're thinking again then, okay, so now the time is right to go for the deputy and one term, because, you see some people think that after one term of councillor, they're ready to jump in with both feet for mayor. And it's been done and it can be done. What was behind your decision?
Well, for me, again, because I think I had a little bit of an advantage covering both local council, so understanding their process. So I didn't just cover Kingsville Council. I covered Gosfield South Council. I covered Gosfield North Council. So I was aware of the issues that were there. I covered County Council. So then I was aware of what the upper tier responsibilities were. And that was the days we had 21 municipalities and 42 members around the table. And I knew everybody's name. So it was one of those, it's like already being connected to understand what the pressures were. And I can still remember how some people voted in some resolutions because it either made an impact or it stopped from progress, which is very interesting. So I still remember some of that. But when I ran in 1998, that was the first amalgamated term. And that was when we had wards in the community. So we had Ward 1, Ward 2, Ward 3, Ward 1 being Gosfield North, Ward 2, Gosfield South, and Ward 3 was Kingsville, Old Kingsville. And then each ward was allowed to elect 2 representatives for each area. So then we would have our 6 members, and then the mayor was elected at large. deputy mayor was not elected at large yet. It was still a pick from the hat, basically, from around the council table. So in 98, when I was able to get the number 2 seat out of 3 electors, so again, just squeaking in. Because I was still the young kid.
Yeah, haven't proved yourself yet completely.
Right. So that next term was actually pretty good because we had a team that was willing to work together for the progress of the entire municipality. Even though they represented their wards, they came to the table recognizing that we need to make investments that built the community around a very controversial amalgamation time because it was very divisive still. There was still the South taxpayers were very upset at the Kingsville and at the North because they felt they were being the ones sacrificing for the entire amalgamation because their taxes went up, even though levels of service may not have been what they're used to. But again, that was 2 rural townships merging with a small urban, Kingsville. And again, that old Kingsville was just the core of about 4,600 people at the time. And then you look at adding the rural community with a few settlement areas. And we didn't want to lose the sense of community. Like we wanted to recognize, and that was part of, my support was, Ruthven is still going to be an important piece of our municipality. Cottam is still not, it's not going to go away. We're not just erasing the name. The heritage, the history is a big part of, who we are. And we still want to tell that story. And that's something I've never changed in terms of from day one to now. They're a big part of our community. We're proud to celebrate them. And what can we do to help support growth? And, the steps we've done in Kingsville, we've mirrored them in Cottam. Sidewalk replacement, wider sidewalks, more improvements in the parks. Every little bit makes a difference at the end. We're trying to do the same in Ruthven with the change of sidewalks, adding new connection points with the countywide active transportation system. Finally, hopefully next year, we'll see the final connection from Old Highway 3, County Road 34, right to Seacliff, right down the main core to allow for the residents and families to enjoy a separated, active transportation trail.
So then you, in 2003, elected mayor. And it was an exciting election, not obviously for yourself because you're elected, but you were the youngest mayor in the county. And Eddie Francis was elected, and he was the youngest mayor in the city. Mm-hmm. You guys are the same age too, right? Very
He was
close.
a couple years younger, yes.
A couple years younger.
Yeah.
There was an excitement around the fact that you guys were young, fresh voices, and seemed like at the time that, the city and the county were going to start, and maybe still happens a bit, but at that time it seemed like, there was going to be a lot of working together, and that, came right after annexation and Tecumseh. Mm-hmm. It had been very divisive. Why did it feel so different then? Than it seems like it does today.
So, well, again, we saw a number of new mayors elected at that time. So there was definitely a transition. That time we moved away from the former mayor, Pat O'Neill, who had been warden, one of the longest serving wardens of the time as well. He was in battle deep with the city, trying to fend off, unnecessary annexation, and had to negotiate something that was reasonable in terms of protecting the future for both the city as well as the future for the county of Essex as an upper tier, without merging the two into one ultimate big city. We didn't want to be, forced into something like you saw with Chatham-Kent, where you kind of lost a little bit of identity by all becoming one. That was the big battle. Like the past mayors and around the county council table had to find a way to protect that service levels between, a city that had huge resources, lots of assessment base, and the county that was trying to be rational with, the county road system and the structure that we had, very different. And trying to protect that for the taxpayers was a critical piece. And when we finally went through that battle, and then 2003 came, a lot of vacated positions. People had served their time, or they had other commitments, and they didn't run at the time. So when Mayor Francis came in and was elected off the bat, he had ideas, future vision. 2003 was my second term on county council, because I had just been deputy mayor that previous term as, for Kingsville. And having served that first term around the county, I understood, what some of the pressures were. But going into 2003 and seeing the direction that both the city was trying to go forward with, past the Michael Hurst days, Mayor Hurst of the city, past the Warden O'Neill days when, he was obviously very protective of our territory. We found a way that instead of having to fight a duel every time, is like, if there's goals or issues or challenges as a region we can work together on that benefits everybody, let's take that approach versus I'm going to take this land and move the boundary line and don't worry about it. Working together has shown to be, I think, a betterment for our region as a whole. And after that, the first 3 years, I think, of getting to understand each other a little bit more in terms of what our goals were was ideal. And I think that helped us shape the term right after that.
Well, and there's still always going to be jockeying between the county and the city over the different joint services, whether it's solid waste or EMS or,
and a lot of that is out of our control because the province, delegated who is responsible for what. So when the province handed out EMS as a responsibility to the county, we're responsible still providing the same level of service to the city, not a question. And everybody pays their share based on the formula. Same with, social services. When the city was made the agent for social services across the county, it started off, fine. I mean, today it's a whole different story when we try to look at equity and fairness of the allocation of funding and service levels. I mean, that's something I've been questioning and pushing the last 2 terms to try to find a fairness in terms of affordable housing, in terms of, social care or services to the public who are being told they have to go to the city to get the service versus try and provide it in the county or in the region where it's needed, where they're paying taxes for. So that's been the most recent, I think, challenge and rub with that level of service. And we're seeing the county step up and putting in more assets and resources to protect the vulnerable citizens, to protect and look for opportunities, within the region. And the city is, I think, starting to see that, why it's important. And I think we'll see a change in the next term as you see the city having that recognition and knowing that we're not afraid at our region, at our level, at the county, to invest dollars to provide that protection as long as it's accessible. Again, accessibility is huge. That inclusivity within the region and that recognition is very important. And that's what we're going to keep fighting for.
Times like this, the last question is always sort of like, any regrets? So what I would like to do is maybe, you're if you look back and do the regrets now, because I really want to talk about the things you're really proud of, because I mean, the town has been recognized in a lot of ways over your tenure. You personally have received personal accolades. The staff of the town, the council, like there's been a lot of positivity that has happened, and directly or indirectly because of your efforts. So let's go there for. Let's just focus on any regrets as you look back. And then let's talk. Hey, that might be his answer. But and then let's talk about what you're really proud of and what you're going to look back on with pride.
No, sir. I think you look at when I came into the role, my whole vision and support for the community was to see the community believe in itself and come together and create opportunity and have special moments that actually helped see us come closer together. So when I look at let's go to 2008. And the first time we had a resident come forward and say, hey, what if we ran for Hockeyville just for fun, right? And then that idea sparked a group committee. That idea brought every person together, whether they liked hockey or not. What happened was you saw a community rally to say, you know what, we've got a spirit here. And it wasn't just about the sport. It was about us coming together, families, businesses, communities saying, let's get our pom-poms out and cheer on the town and rally. And that echoed and that created a vibe across Essex County. We saw other communities supporting us. We saw the city come forward saying, we're going to support Kingsville. And you were there those nights when we were, getting cut right down to the top 5.
I've looking back too, and I've never seen anything quite like it. I mean, I remember the face-off circle drawn at the 4 corners. And
you had to mention that. Mayor Santos, who gave you that idea?
Well, there we go. See, I didn't know that.
I'm joking.
Which committee were you on that time?
But I remember that
was the Memorial Cup.
It was.
And there were things that happened that probably shouldn't happen now. Like I remember they let me go in the aerial truck.
Oh, did you?
And I was right at the top of the fire department's aerial truck to take a picture. And I'm not making this about me, but what I saw was just this mob of people all gathered around this center circle, and the coming togetherness was
our police
awesome.
Our police were dropping the puck between the kids in the center of the four corners. Blessed the traffic we created that day by closing things down. But we absolutely created
now you close it all the time.
It's Tuesday.
And it brought everybody. Arts came together. The posters, the designs, the music came together. We had the arrival of our own Hockeyville song. When we look at Jen Knight, who just became stardom for us, our legend in Kingsville that we love seeing. And the video when we had Hockey Night in Canada here, when we were in the top 5. And they broadcast all of that.
Friends and family from across the country going, you guys are on TV. Like, we are on TV.
I was chumming it up with Kelly Rudy. Scott Oak was sitting in the stands. I remember that doing live interviews.
Yeah. So, and that came from ideas from the community. It wasn't a political move. It was like the town got on board. Yeah. It was something different. You don't normally do that as a municipality. It's not on our top 10 things to do. However, when the opportunity came with the community rallying, community backed it. The municipality was there to support where our facilities were. And the goal at the end of the day, we finished second. We're Kingsville, Hockeyville, Ontario, Robertval, Quebec. Yes, I'll never forget that. But it was great times. But from that spurred a huge movement in Kingsville in terms of investing in ourselves. And that's kind of where I'm getting to your answer. I'm not trying to dodge it.
Well, you've already avoided the one on the regrets. But anyway,
no,
because that was the first question.
No, I'm just kidding.
We'll get back to it.
We're getting there.
No, go ahead.
But it created the new Kingsville Community Building Committee, because we looked at what were the needs that were missing in Kingsville. We had an old Carnegie library that was undersized, not accessible. It wasn't serving the purposes. So we were looking at a new public library. We were looking at a senior center. We didn't have capacity. We had our clubs, our friendly club and associations that were in play, but again, no real space in the community that was offered to them. We looked at the arena, and the recreation center hadn't been updated since it was built. We had small dressing rooms. We had concerns for the safety and the service for our hockey kids, the skating, anyone at the facility. We identified the lack of additional, public parks and recreation services. Like, we never had a swimming pool. We didn't have accesses and amenities that helped provide a service to all of our sectors of the community. So that committee helped create basically 4 pockets of projects that were key going forward. From that aspect, the town invested in itself. We found properties that helped us renovate an old bingo hall, an old grocery store into the current library. We created it with a heritage theme and a message that showed, instead of the flat roof, let's create this little peaked roof and create a little bit of history, get some streetscape. That came through. No regrets. Awesome. The Carnegie became a place of, okay, so we're moving the library. What can the Carnegie be? We didn't have a business center. We didn't have a tourism center. We were still attracting people. Our visitor center was a little gazebo in front of the police station that was volunteered with our horticulture society and volunteers that were stepping in to do the role for the town. We upgraded that to the Carnegie and invested in making it accessible. It was a heritage building. We didn't want to see it lost. It was one of the first heritage designated buildings in Kingsville, provincially designated, and one we wanted to protect, and we did that. Once we started the idea, a physician in town had owned the lot next door and said, you know what, I see what you're doing. I'm going to donate that lot to the town for the purposes of making the Carnegie building accessible. A professional in our community just donated a downtown property at no cost as just a little write-off and gift to the town forever. Now we have the Carnegie Parkette, and we're able to install new public washrooms and the elevator that's in place. And for visitor, business, tourism, now arts center helped create this space that we've been asking for. And again, the Art Society that's come on board, the partnership with the BIA at the time, and they're still operating there. It's a new space, helping fill a need and gap. Part 2, good. Part 3 was the addition at the arena when we looked at the need for larger dressing rooms, accessibility, the space, working with the Kingsville Comets at the time, because all the groups wanted to invest and say, yes, let's make this enhancement. That came from Hockeyville, because they saw this as, okay, we now have $100,000 that are able to invest into the arena, although we needed more, but it started that ball rolling. And then What we saw from there became the Ruthven super build of a house, where we brought 4 contractors together from our community, builders, very trusted. They came together. We built a house in Ruthven with 300 volunteers. We were hoping to get 40 or 50 volunteers. We got 300. And within 24 hours, we built our first house in Kingsville. That was then used and sold to help raise the revenues to help build the balance and more of the needs at the arena. That created, again, another success story as a community coming together. So three awards, 3 top stars from that one. We saw a greater investment in the Lions Hall after that was donated to us as well. So we saw the youth association there at the time, Kingsville Youth Association, changed names a few times since then, but that provided support for them and a space for them. Lions Club still had a space that they can be proud of and work from there. It's helped develop ideas around the Lions Park, and we're starting to see progress from there. So all pieces that were missing, Intertown Park, access to public library, accessibility, arts and culture focused, and tourism focused, supporting business focused, senior center established at the Unico Center after we purchased the property and created the support from other industries to sponsor it. And then we were able to sell part of the building to help support small business, who then were now in their own entrepreneurship and they own their own building. And we kept the piece we needed. We shared what we needed. Everyone was winning. It was win-win-win. Then the swimming pool, the one regret, where we talk about an opportunity where the town was ready to enter for the first time a true public-private partnership. The town wasn't ready. We tried to put it as part of the expansion at the arena. First was one of the ideas. We did the research. The other idea was then to work with a fitness company in town. They're no longer called Total Fitness, but we worked with them to create. They had an idea. Help us fund the capital for the installation of a swimming pool. We'll give you 10 hours a week, from what I recall, of time that you can do your community programs, fitness programs, swimming programs that the town wanted to run. You had to provide $250,000 as startup cost, basically, for that. And for 10 years, you have 10 free hours or 12 free hours. We were kind of still working through all that process at the time. That got so much community pushback. I mean, it was 50-50. It did split the community in terms of not being ready to provide tax dollars to a private corporation to install a capital asset that would guarantee. The argument was minimal hours. Over 10 years, is that enough credit back or support? The community was divided. Council was divided. When we presented it, I think my regret is we didn't do more of the detail that maybe we tried, but it just seemed to be rushed at that time, going right into the end of 2005, 2006 election year. So when the pushback came and the council voted 4-3 against it, we weren't able to resurrect it, even though we were still establishing the business case for what would be the programs the town would run every week for the next 10 years. We were trying to paint the picture as clear as we could, because we were trying to respond to the criticism, respond to you can't do that. That's against, municipal tax policy. You don't give that to private corporations. So we missed the chance. We lost that. The regret is, being strategic. Should have done more work. Should have done that work. We could have had a swimming pool in town that would have cost the town zero, other than the initial capital investment, which is much better than the $5 million capital investment that we required to build their own pool, and then much better than the operational costs, which are a big burden on the tax base. But we missed that one.
As long as the private company didn't decide that it wasn't feasible to keep operating the pool.
Correct. Or the town then enhanced the services from 10 hours a week to what we could operate. Right. And provide. So there was always the unknowns from that aspect.
I remember that one vividly, because it was funny that Kingsville was looking to invest in a pool at the same time that Leamington was deciding whether they wanted to keep theirs open or not.
Mm-hmm. And it was a time when we were doing all the committee research with our parks manager and our community committee, and we approached both Leamington and Essex, and the joke around the table was Leamington was ready to move their pool to Kingsville to save money. Yeah. But again, the cost is real. Like when you look at how much it's subsidized by the property tax. So again, municipally run versus the potential.
The Leamington one runs, and I haven't seen recent numbers. I remember doing those stories. It was close to $1 million deficit of taxpayer funded a year. Like the overall rec center.
Mm-hmm. We looked at almost $300,000 a year just for the swimming pool was the operational requirement from the tax base.
It's a lot of money.
beyond beyond the user fees.
I'm surprised you didn't say Medawas Park.
Not a regret, because when I look at the loss of the part of Kingsville's Lakeside Park when they sold it for the development, one of the biggest goals and the reaction I saw from the Kingsville community was, how rare is it to be a waterfront community but not have public access to waterfront? So when there were opportunities to acquire Medawas Park, for example, instead of having an American developer create a tower at the top, we were able to expropriate it from him to create that space we have now. We had a couple years prior to that, there was an opportunity to purchase the lands where the Medawas townhouse development is, and the council of the day didn't want to up the ante by, I'm going to say, a small investment comparatively. I'm talking like less than $10,000 difference, and by turning that down, took away that additional opportunity to expand the park as a true waterfront and recognized area as the Medawas history has, Kingsville, with the access by the public. So when we lost that opportunity, when this opportunity came to expropriate from the American ownership, there's no regret there, because that was the first time a municipality was able to gain access to waterfront property for the public for future long term, and that was ideal. That's not something I regret. It's something that is a key point of why I ran for council. It's, how do I restore some balance and access to public beaches? And that was a resounding support for it. All of the waterfront plan from 1980 or 88 that Kingsville had, doing, again, my research prior to my time, there's some great ideas that were in case there that if we're carried through, we would see a much more viable, Kingsville Harbor, supporting our fishing industry, supporting the industry there, but also add some commercial aspect for the longevity of it that we haven't been able to take advantage of at this point. I've seen some future renditions of what could be coming, and it's exciting. If there's a will and desire to follow through with that, this town's waterfront development and activity will gain and benefit and see tremendous progress, which is golden. So hopefully you'll see that, when after I'm gone, but the opportunity is there because there is the spirit within our community to make it happen.
I'll come out and ask it. You can yell at me after. Would you look at the Grovedale and obviously hindsight's 2020. Mm-hmm. Do you think there's a way that you would have handled that process differently looking back on it?
Certainly. When I look at how, because that didn't just happen overnight. Like that was a project where we worked with the previous owners of King's Landing. They were looking to provide something that would be lasting in the public ownership. They could have sold to anyone else. They could have sold to a private developer and would have seen it, torn down and create, a condo or a hotel or something there that would have been there. But the previous owners were so committed to our community in different ways that they did support. They wanted to have an opportunity for Kingsville to expand the park space, be a part of an anchor to the parklands next door. So when the initial plans around the Medawas included the renovation of the existing King's Landing, that was the intention, was to have a space that preserved, public access, and in the long haul and long term, it gave a place of pride for a family that wanted to give back to Kingsville. When the first reports came back of the stability of the King's Landing, because the foundation, again, this was an old building. Again, the previous Grovedale, hotel was what it was known as. When that stability report came back and said it wasn't worth salvaging and the cost was, outrageous, the municipality had to make a decision at that point to tear down. And that was, a sad day in that aspect because we did lose an iconic piece. But from that process, the public at the time also asked, well, what could go there? So we created a public process. We consulted with them. We created 3 different designs for what would be a replacement building there, trying to keep in touch, one, with the heritage theme and aspect, and recognizing we have done a community outreach to find out what other needs or uses could be filled in town for the community. And we got a 20-page report of what activities could go there. More municipal programming, more support for special events, additional rentals because the pressure at Lakeside Park Pavilion was being rented to the max, 2 years in advance. And there was a demand from the community that said, If you create another rental venue, it'll provide more tourism, more opportunity, more business. That was all spelled out through the process. So following that process, I think, was good. We asked the community, what 3 types of buildings do you support? Which one was your favorite? We created a replica of the Grovedale, which was eventually built. We created a replica of the Meadowas casino kind of a building, and another replica of like the pavilion itself to be in that place. That was all public process. That was all identified. The challenge that we ran into was then a time in place where we had a transition in leadership in terms of, our CAOs, and we saw a change in our administration. And we had this project kind of leapfrogging from one administration to the next. And then as we were looking to create a game plan for this development, we had previous applications, previous estimates on what the project cost was going to be. And then there was a little disconnect between council, the public, and then the administrative process. So when that was happening, there was the approval to move forward through a budget process. However, it came through in stages as opposed to being built as a purposely built. It was like, we're going to contract stage 1, then we're going to contract stage 2. It was a different approach. Council at the time supported that, thinking it was going to save money, and the reverse happened. The product costs for things started to go up. The escalation of labor became very short and not available. That created a huge strain on the contract that went, not being able to complete the project on time. Material costs went up, labor costs went up, the minimum wage stuff all went up. So it hit a critical point where it started to question, like, maybe we should have just done a traditional RFP, but we were already too far gone. So as the process kept going, 6 months down the road, 9 months down the road, a year down the road, and different contract changes came forward and different pressures with the availability of the workforce, it just escalated the price. And that's just something we couldn't manage and weren't able to corral. And then as more decisions were being done from the administrative level, that gave the appearance, and we lost the appearance of what was it actually costing us. So when we were looking at originally a $2.2 to $2.4 million project, and as the numbers came back and when we finally asked for the final, we looked at just over $4 million in terms of costs that we weren't anticipated. And we had applied for a grant based on a $2 million project. So again, you talk about, wanted to try, we did the process correctly all the way there, and then did something different that just backfired in terms of costings and expenses. But the expense and the costs were all spent through the town's reserve funds. So it's not costing tax. We're not still paying for the project. It's all paid for. Now, the effort is to maintain a business case that supports it. So it's not a drain on taxes. And other than the pandemic hitting, where we would have had the rentals and the special uses, all the operational costs were covered through the rentals for weddings and concerts. And the bonus is then the community events that we can host around it. So going forward, it's not going to be a draw or a concern on the tax subsidization at all. It's going to be a business approach. And again, unless council changes their mind to get away from offering those types of opportunities, which has been supportive for the pavilion and other cases, and supportive for local entrepreneurs to do catering and local businesses, it can still be there and serve a purpose and provide the amenity space next to the park, which again in the future can change. But again, it's unfortunate the cost process that it went through, very contrary to what we traditionally do. And, there's still a lot of criticism around that, unfortunately, but we made the decision and we followed through with it. Now it's important that it doesn't become any kind of, cost on taxpayers, because it's going to sustain itself.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's an election year. I'm sure we've debated
I heard about it.
Yeah. No, but we've talked about the ability and the willingness to run. And as you're well aware, you when you are a public face like you are, there's a lot of plaudits that can come your way, but there's also a lot of scrutiny, a lot of negativity. With that being said, what do you want your legacy to be? Like, what do you want in 2 years, 5 years? Okay, yeah, I remember him. Yeah, I didn't like that decision, but man, did he do this, and this right? Or, how do you want to be recognized and looked at as the mayor of this town?
I was going to use the retirement speech kind of,
Was
here's
that the one?
my accreditation.
Let me roll it out for you.
Yeah.
I have been keeping this scroll with me.
Why did it take you so
Here's
long
the
to ask that question?
$20. Yeah. Here's the $20.
Yeah. You know what? For me, it's never been about one thing. Like, it's not one project that stands out over another. It's how we got there and where we are today. And for me, I want people to remember and reflect that I wanted to engage the community. I wanted to bring people to the table and help find and find progress and results. And when you look back at, the time, I've spent and dedicated to the community, it's always been trying to get to create a place where, again, as I said at the top of the show, people were running away from this town. I wanted to create a space where people were coming to this town. And I hope that at the end of the day, after, I do depart and come back and people realize people from the city are coming to Kingsville. People from our neighbors are coming to Kingsville, not vice versa. There's a vibe, a space, a quality of life and quality of space that Kingsville is offering that has been 2 decades of work to show our pride. I've always touted tourism. I've always touted economic development and the value of doing sometimes just the little things that make people want to come. Throw out little tidbits like, I travel Canada. I love visiting Canada for tourism because there's so much to see and do. And when I go to places like the Far East Coast and look at, what's the most eastern point of Canada, and you go visit that lighthouse, you say, I was there. I took some of that back, going way back, to say, well, Canada's most southern town has kind of been a jingle for us for a while. And that created some arguments between our neighbors, but it was good arguments. It made people think, made people come to the south. Canada's most southern town. I can now say I visited, right? You tell them you're south of Detroit and they go bonkers. They don't understand geography. The north is Detroit. Is north. Yeah. The Great White North is Detroit. Yeah. No, but all that was always been about creating a space that I think I can be proud of, saying instead of, having people depart, they looked at Kingsville as a place to go and come to versus the generation that we grew up in.
It's funny you say that because I've never really thought of that being a positive, but really you're right. Like when I moved here and I moved here the year you were elected mayor, and the town was desperately trying to get people to know where it is. And now people are desperately trying to stop people from moving here.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
No more development.
But that's a good thing.
No, yeah.
Like that's a good change. It really shows the kind of metamorphosis of the town.
The big picture was you create that space, and then businesses will also want to come and invest, which then turns into local job creation, which then turns into opportunity, but then with the need for housing. That's constant. That's just a consistent. We talk about economics 101, supply, demand, opportunity. If we don't have enough tax base or assessment base, it's hard to grow. It's hard to create new spaces or places that invest in our neighborhoods and our subdivisions. The playgrounds in each subdivision is part of our change that we saw. Since when did we invest in 2 or 3 lots to help put a green space in as part of the housing? Yeah, that started going back to 2003.
Because it's an election year, I'm going to ask that I want you to take 1997 Nelson and 2022 Nelson and everything you know. What advice would you give someone?
Oh, here it is. The advice question.
It's the perfect way to close out the episode.
Wait,
Steve.
before we get to the advice, then I want to know, were you going to run?
No, you can't ask him that.
No, I want to know.
That's not fair.
Well, he can ask. He doesn't have to answer. But yeah,
were you going to run?
So I had taken out my papers and the candidate policy documents, and I was getting ready to do all of that. And
for mayor? No.
Yeah, yeah, Mayor of Windsor. No,
school board trustee.
But it was again one of those things. I was able to create. After the pandemic, throughout the entire pandemic, having lost the full-time job, the security of being able to manage and have both a full-time work and the mayor's not full-time work.
Losing the full-time job and still doing the interview with the company that shut the paper down. But anyway.
He was waiting for that one.
He was.
And the important part of the lesson is that you never burn bridges. So you continue to
They
establish
burned the
connections.
bridge. They burned the bridge. They burned the holes.
Steve's clearly not. Yeah. He's taking a side. Taking a side.
Yeah. So, no, I definitely went back and forth, to run, not to run. I saw a lot of challenges in the current role I served as mayor and trying to find a full-time employment. And it was a big challenge. And that was a big question with family and identifying what direction to go. And, certainly when I was able to, get the confidence and work at the Jack Minor Bird Sanctuary and the foundation as their executive director, that opened a whole new door to say, there's an opportunity to stay. There's an opportunity that I could work both and maintain the steering the ship forward with Kingsville and the progress I'd like to continue to make, representing our community with pride and the workload. And then it's, a couple months in, I was seeing how important the work around the sanctuary was. I was seeing the challenges that they struggled through the pandemic as well. And it became a critical point where I don't think I could do both because of the time commitment. But then along the way came another opportunity, which with the township of Achtos, that again provided that balance for me that said, you can still community build. You can work full time. You can have your time with your family. You can create a living and then still be proud of a community that you're helping move forward. And that's when it was like,
you put the papers away.
put the paper away.
That's it.
Yeah. So Steve, ask the question to round out the episode because it's fantastic.
Yeah. Here we go. Just, whether it's a candidate who maybe they've served a term or two, the current members of council who they just don't have your years of experience, or somebody new to the table, regardless of age, regardless of, the knowledge, so to speak, as far as municipal happenings. What advice do you give to people?
Yeah. Well, number one is always be genuine. Like don't become the position, be yourself. Understand that your role is a collective part of the team. It's not just one idea. It's not my idea. It's not my motion. It's the council working collectively. So whoever, puts something on the table, worked collectively towards that goal, if it makes sense. Don't make it personal, because if there are times, I've been around many, council tables, and I was trying to count how many council meetings, but it's crazy over 24 and
Council
a half years.
committee.
But honestly, there are times when you're not going to agree with every decision. But at the end of the day, one of the first lessons I learned watching was that once you make a decision at the table, agree or disagree, you walk away respecting the majority decision, and you respect that. You can't continue to harbor that as a loss, a win or a loss, because that may affect your next decision or the way you process the next question or recommendation that comes before you. So just be genuine. Remember, what is the impact at the end of the day of this decision? How does it not just affect you? What does it mean to the community? So keeping that perspective has certainly kept me grounded, because it's never been about like myself. It's never been about, just one issue. It's always been about how can we create that as a positive? What else is around there that maybe we can create? Maybe it's a partnership. Some issues are more difficult than others, for sure. But when you look at the bigger picture in terms of how do we create opportunity, you work from there.
Sound advice.
Just when he mentioned how many meetings, I got thinking, how many ribbons has he cut?
Oh gosh.
How many parades has he walked in?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
How many miles of parades?
Well,
there you
exactly.
go.
Well,
how many candies has he thrown? Like, just
Public
How many
speaking.
babies has he kissed?
I don't know him to be the baby kissing mayor.
well, a lot of the handshakes, a lot of the parades.
Yeah.
My family grew up in public life, right? Like I shared so many public moments with the community. I got married on Migration Festival Day, and before the wedding day, I was in the parade for Migration Fest, and I had a float with all my groomsmen on my wedding day to be part of the Kingsville community. And my wife was awesome. Before my wife was my wife, she was awesome, my fiance, and she created a sign, "Get me to the church on time," and we put that on my float. So again, sharing that life moment with Kingsville and growing in their spotlight. So they saw young family come to be in a community that was tagged as a bedroom community, as a retirement community, but they saw youth and energy wanting to be invested. And then they saw me start to grow. They saw our family come. They saw my first child born. They saw my first child now just graduate grade school. How crazy is that to go through it? So I've been blessed to be able to share those moments with the community as, here's my family. We are open. We are here. We volunteer. We participate. We're engaged. And that's the pride I take, is that I was able to show, family is everything. And now is an opportunity to reflect on family and put my focus on them in our future too.
And let's not forget, you got to document and report on it for a large part of your life as well. So you got to tell the story publicly, not just being leader in the community, but you were the voice. You both were the voices for 20 years, and that's gone, which we've discussed at nauseum. But on a whole, Mayor Santos, because last time we could call him Mayor Santos. Thank you for taking the time out of your last few days here in Kingsville and spending it with the three of us and our listenership, which we joke is 3. It's actually 9.
Excellent.
But
Yeah, we've tripled.
But we appreciate everything that you've done for us with regards to being available and handling what questioning that we've tossed at you. But thank you for your leadership in the community, because from me personally, and I'm sure it echoes from these gentlemen, without some of the things and your leadership and what you've brought to Kingsville, you've helped define what it is that we value in this town. So thank you for the time tonight, and thank you for your service. And from me and the rest of the team, best of luck. Hope you come back in the summertime next year and tell us stories about what you've done in Agitos, because from what you've been able to do for us.
Let's get the crap out of you.
We have an audience.
There's a mall. They're mobbing us.
I'm sure you'll have similar success, and the best wishes and best of luck to you. So thank you for spending the time tonight.
New Sister City, maybe?
New Sister City. I don't know. We have to. There isn't even a city there, though, right? That's what.
Sister Township.
Township. There we go. Yes. Green area.
Yeah. Well, they're known for potatoes. We're known for some meat and potatoes together. I don't know. See what happens.
That sounds delicious.
Convenient for a future episode. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on this special episode of That Kingsville Podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe to us on YouTube, because eventually we want to retire off all our YouTube money, but can't help until you do that. So special
goals.
special thanks to Quantum Sound Productions and Gary Glass for production of this episode. We'll see you next time.